The coastal winter had a way of seeping into bones, of making even the warmest hearth feel like a temporary reprieve from an inevitable freeze. For 3 weeks, I had watched her stand across the street like a ghost that refused to haunt properly, never approaching, never speaking, just existing in my peripheral vision like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Every morning at 6, I would unlock the bakery doors and catch a glimpse of her retreating figure, disappearing around the corner like she had been standing guard all night. Every evening at closing time, I would catch the faintest trace of cedarwood and winter frost lingering on the salted breeze, evidence that she had been near. I refused to acknowledge it. Refused to let the sight of her disheveled appearance, her once immaculate suits replaced by worn wool coats, her perfectly styled hair now perpetually windswept and unkempt, chip away at the fortress I had constructed around my heart. "Mama, the sad lady is outside again," Iris announced one particularly bitter morning, her small face pressed against the frosted bakery window. My hands stilled on the croissant dough I was folding. "Go help your sisters with their homework," I signed, keeping my movements deliberately calm even as my pulse quickened. "But she's been there for hours, Mama. Isn't she cold?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the window and pulled the blinds shut, blocking the view of the solitary figure huddled beneath the bookstore awning across the street. The children had noticed. Of course they had. Children see everything, and Luna, my fierce, observant little alpha, had been watching the stranger with growing suspicion and something that looked dangerously close to recognition. That night, after I had tucked them into bed and read them their stories with careful, expressive signs, I found myself standing at the window of my new house, staring out at the stormy sea crashing against the cliffs below. The house was beautiful, 3 stories of weathered gray stone with warm yellow lights in every window, a far cry from the drafty apartment above the bakery that had been our home for 4 years. I had bought it with the advance from the distribution contract. It was meant to be our sanctuary, our forever home. Now it felt like a cage. "Wren." Mrs. Higgins' voice came from behind me, soft and hesitant. "You need to eat something. You've barely touched your dinner." I turned to face the elderly woman who had become more family than employee over the past 5 years. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her weathered face etched with concern. "I'm not hungry," I signed. "Liar." She crossed her arms, the gesture so familiar it almost made me smile. "That woman has been outside since dawn. She doesn't look well, Wren. She looks broken." Good, I wanted to sign. Let her suffer. Let her feel a fraction of the pain I felt when I walked out into that freezing rain with nothing but a suitcase and a secret. But I didn't sign that. Because despite everything, despite the burning rage that still simmered beneath my carefully maintained composure, I couldn't deny the small, traitorous part of me that noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way her shoulders hunched against the cold, the raw desperation in her gaze when she thought I wasn't looking. "She's just trying to manipulate me," I signed instead. "It's a tactic. Make herself look pathetic so I'll feel sorry for her." Mrs. Higgins sighed, the sound heavy with years of wisdom. "I've seen a lot of manipulation in my life, dear. That woman out there? That's not manipulation. That's penance." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, the sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs echoing through the darkness. My children slept soundly in the rooms next to mine, their breathing a steady rhythm that usually soothed me. Tonight, nothing soothed me. At 3:47 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. I pulled on my heaviest coat, wrapped a thick scarf around my neck, and crept down the stairs. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a plan. I just knew that if I stayed in that house for one more second, I would suffocate. The coastal town slept silently under a blanket of stars. The streets were empty, the only sound the distant roar of the ocean and the crunch of my boots on frozen gravel. I didn't intend to walk toward the bakery. But my feet carried me there anyway, past the darkened storefronts, past the closed fish market, past the shuttered tourist shops that wouldn't open again until spring. And there she was. Valerie sat on the freezing stone steps of the bakery's back entrance, her knees drawn to her chest, her head bowed. She was wearing the same threadbare wool coat she had been wearing for weeks, and even in the darkness, I could see how much weight she had lost. Her shoulders, once so broad and commanding, seemed fragile beneath the worn fabric. She looked up at the sound of my approach, and even from 10 feet away, I could see the devastation in her gray eyes, the same gray eyes that now looked back at me from my eldest daughter's face. "Elena," she breathed, her voice cracking like thin ice. She scrambled to her feet, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I know you don't want me here. I couldn't stay away. I should have turned around. I should have walked back to my warm house, climbed into my comfortable bed, and let her freeze on those steps. That would have been the smart thing to do. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my small whiteboard, and wrote, 'What are you doing here?'" Valerie read the words, and a broken, desperate sound escaped her throat. "I couldn't stay in Silver Peak. Everywhere I looked, I saw you. The bed we shared. The kitchen where you used to bake for me. The gardens where you would walk, your hands moving in those beautiful signs I was too arrogant to learn properly." She took a hesitant step closer, and I stiffened, my hand instinctively raising in a warning gesture. She stopped immediately, her hands flying up in surrender. "I'm not going to touch you," she said quickly. "I won't even come closer if you don't want me to. I needed you to know that I've left it all behind. The company. The money. Everything I thought was so important." I stared at her, searching for any hint of deception. But there was none. Only a raw, agonizing sincerity that made my chest ache with a pain I thought I had buried years ago. "You left your empire?" I wrote. "I signed over controlling interest to the board," Valerie said, her voice hollow. "I walked away from everything. The penthouse. The cars. The boardroom where I spent so many nights working instead of coming home to you." Her voice cracked again, and she looked away, her jaw clenching against the tears that threatened to spill. "Celeste took everything from me," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not the money. I don't care about the money. She took the years I could have spent with you. She took the chance to watch my children grow. She took the memories we should have made together, and she made them impossible." A single tear escaped, tracing a silver path down her cheek in the moonlight. "I can never get those years back. I can never undo what I did to you. But I can spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your forgiveness, even if I never receive it." Something inside me cracked. Not the wall I had built around my heart. That wall was still standing, reinforced by years of pain and survival. But something smaller, something I had kept buried so deep I had forgotten it existed. The part of me that still remembered what it was like to love her. I turned away, my hands trembling so violently I could barely grip the whiteboard. I wrote another message, my handwriting jagged and uneven. "It's 4 a.m. You'll get sick out here." Valerie stared at the words, her eyes widening with something that looked like hope. "Does that mean?" "It means go home. Wherever home is now. I don't want your death on my conscience." "Home," she repeated, the word coming out bitter and broken. "I don't have a home anymore. I sold everything. I'm renting a room at the Seabreeze Inn." She gestured vaguely toward the east end of town. "It's small. Damp. The mattress is awful, and the heating barely works." "Good," I wrote, a flash of vindictive satisfaction cutting through my complicated emotions. Suffering builds character. To my surprise, Valerie let out a weak, broken laugh. "You always did have a sharp tongue, even without a voice. I miss that. I missed everything about you." I shoved the whiteboard back into my pocket, unwilling to engage with that statement. The wind picked up, cutting through my coat like knives, and I shivered involuntarily. Valerie noticed immediately. Her alpha instincts, apparently still intact despite everything, flared to life. "You're cold. You should go back inside." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have kept you out here." I stared at her, this woman who had once been my entire universe, now wrapped in a thin coat on the freezing steps of my bakery, apologizing for my discomfort. It was absurd. It was infuriating. It was against every rational thought in my head, tragically, pathetically poignant. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the key to the bakery, and unlocked the back door. I pushed it open and gestured inside with a sharp, impatient motion. Valerie's eyes went wide with disbelief. "What?" "Don't make me say it again," I wrote, shoving the whiteboard in her face. "In. Now." She hesitated for only a second before ducking inside. I followed her, closing the door against the bitter wind, and flicked on the lights. The bakery was warm and familiar, filled with the comforting sense of yeast and sugar even in the dead of night. My workspace, my sanctuary, was exactly as I had left it, the stainless steel counters gleaming under the soft lights. Valerie stood in the center of the room, looking utterly lost. "Elena, I can't stay here. You don't owe me any kindness." I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the small staff room at the back. There was a worn couch there, a relic from the previous owner that I had never bothered to replace. I pointed at it aggressively. "Sleep. I'll wake you before the staff arrives. Don't make me regret this." Valerie stared at me, her gray eyes swimming with tears. "Why are you doing this?" I didn't have an answer for that. I didn't know why I was doing it. Maybe it was the sight of her shivering. Maybe it was the memory of a time when she had held me through storms and whispered that she would protect me from everything. Maybe it was the desperate, irrational hope that the woman I had loved was still somewhere inside this broken shell. I grabbed a spare blanket from the cupboard and threw it at her face. "Valerie," I wrote in large, aggressive letters. "Sleep. Now." She caught the blanket, clutching it to her chest like a lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve anything from you." And oh, I signed with vicious satisfaction. "You don't." She laughed again, that same broken, pathetic sound, and I felt something shift in my chest. This was dangerous. This was a slippery slope leading straight back to the heartbreak I had spent 5 years trying to forget. But as I watched her curl up on the small couch, pulling the thin blanket over her shoulders, I couldn't bring myself to leave. I sat in the armchair across from her, intending to keep watch until dawn. Instead, I watched her fall asleep in under 2 minutes, her breathing evening out into the same steady rhythm as our children, her features softening with unconscious vulnerability. For the first time in 3 weeks, I let myself look at her. Really look at her. She was thinner. Older. The sharp angles of her face had become gaunt, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her hands, those powerful hands that had once held empires, were chapped and red from the cold. She had given up everything. Her company. Her fortune. Her entire life as she knew it. All to stand freezing in the dark, hoping for a glimpse of the family she had destroyed. And despite everything, despite the rage that still burned in my chest, despite the years of loneliness and struggle, despite the tears I had shed in the darkness of that tiny apartment, a part of me, the part that had never stopped loving her, ached with a pain that would not be silenced. I leaned forward and pulled the blanket up to her chin, tucking it around her shoulders like I used to do when we were still married and I still believed in happily ever after. She murmured something in her sleep, my name, spoken like a prayer. I pulled my hand back as if burned. This was a mistake. She was a mistake. But as I sat there watching her sleep, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the alarm on my phone blaring. I had fallen asleep in the armchair, my neck aching from the awkward angle. Valerie was still asleep on the couch, But the blanket was now wrapped around her entirely, her face buried in the thin pillow. I shook her awake roughly. Valerie's eyes flew open, her hand instinctively reaching for something, probably the weapon she used to carry in her corporate days, before she realized where she was. "Elena?" "Did I?" "Out," I signed. "Before my staff arrives." "Now." "Right." "Yes." "Of course." She scrambled to her feet, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "Thank you." "For." "Don't thank me." I grabbed my whiteboard. "I didn't do it for you. I just didn't want to find your corpse on my steps." Valerie nodded, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "Of course. That's very practical of you." I shoved a bakery bag into her hands. It contained a croissant and a hot chocolate I had quickly prepared while she was still groggy. She stared at the bag like it contained the secret to the universe. "Elena, save your tears. Eat. Leave. I don't want to see you again." She clutched the bag to her chest. "Elena, I know I don't deserve your kindness. But I want you to know I'm going to fight for them. For our children. Not with lawyers or courts, I would never do that to you. But I'm going to show them that I exist. That I love them. That I made a terrible mistake, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn the right to be in their lives." The audacity of it made my blood boil. How dare you? You can't just show up and demand to be part of their lives. "I know," she said. "I'm not demanding. I'm asking. Begging. Whatever you need me to do." I grabbed her arm and shoved her toward the back door. The gesture was aggressive, but she didn't resist. She simply let me push her through the door and out into the gray morning light. "Goodbye, Elena," she said softly. "Thank you for letting me stay." I slammed the door in her face. And then I leaned against it, my hand pressed to my chest, trying to calm the frantic beating of my heart. This was going to destroy me. I could feel it. But it didn't destroy me. In fact, over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. Valerie didn't disappear. But she also didn't push. She found a job. I learned later that she had taken a position as a night security guard at the local fish processing plant, of all things. She lived in that pathetic room at the Sea Breeze Inn, and she made absolutely no effort to approach me or the children. But she also made no effort to hide. She would walk past the silent haven every morning, always at the same time, never stopping, just passing. She would sit on the beach in the evenings, watching the waves, never quite close enough to seem like she was waiting for something. And every night, at exactly 3 a.m., I would find her sleeping on the couch in the staff room. I never invited her. She never asked. She would simply be there when I arrived to start my baking, curled up under the thin blanket, looking so fragile and lost that I couldn't bring myself to throw her out. It became a ritual, a secret that existed only in the hours between midnight and dawn. I would unlock the back door at 3 a.m., and she would be there, waiting silently. I would gesture for her to come inside, and she would shuffle to the staff room without a word. I would prepare the dough for the day's pastries, and she would sleep. And every morning, I would shake her awake, shove a bakery bag into her hands, and watch her leave through the back door before the staff arrived. We never spoke. We never acknowledged what was happening. It was an unspoken arrangement built on a foundation of mutual avoidance and stubborn, foolish kindness. Until one morning, Luna caught me. "Who is the lady who sleeps in the back room?" I nearly dropped the tray of croissants I was carrying. Luna stood in the doorway of the staff room, her gray eyes fixed on the rumpled blanket I had left on the couch. "Luna," I signed, my hands trembling. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough." She crossed her arms in a gesture so similar to her mother's that it made my heart ache. "I heard you leave the house last night. I followed you. I should have been furious. I should have been terrified. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of keeping secrets. Tired of pretending that the past hadn't come crashing into our present. That's a complicated story, I signed slowly. Sit down. I'll tell you. Luna sat on the edge of the staff room couch, her little legs dangling over the edge. She looked so grown up, so serious, with her mother's sharp features and intense gray eyes. I sat beside her, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached for my whiteboard, but Luna stopped me with a small hand on my arm. Use your hands, Mama. I want to see you sign it. I took a deep breath and began. A long time ago, before you were born, I was married to someone. An alpha. I loved her very much. Was it the sad lady? Luna asked. Yes. The word hung in the air between us. Luna considered this for a long moment. Why isn't she your wife anymore? Because she did something terrible. She believed a lie about me. She threw me out. I was already pregnant with you and your sisters. She didn't know. Luna's little face scrunched up in confusion. So she made a mistake? Yes. A very big mistake. Does she know about us now? Yes. She found out at the expo. That's why she's here. She wants to know you. She wants to be part of your life. But you don't want her to be. I hesitated. The truth was so much more complicated than that. I don't know what I want, I signed finally. I spent 5 years hating her. 5 years raising you and your sisters alone. I built a life without her. And now she's here and I don't know if I can trust her. I don't know if she deserves to be in your lives. Luna was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at me with those piercing gray eyes and asked the question I had been dreading since the moment I saw Valerie in that hotel hallway. Does she love us? I opened my mouth to sign something, I didn't know what, but I stopped. Because the truth was I didn't know. I didn't know if Valerie's feelings were genuine or just guilt. I didn't know if she could be trusted with the fragile hearts of my children. He loves you, I signed finally. Even if she doesn't know how to show it properly. Luna nodded slowly, processing this. She was the one who left that box of books on our porch last week, wasn't she? The one with all the picture books about the ocean. My eyes widened. I had wondered where those books had come from. I had assumed Mrs. Higgins had bought them. I found her hiding in the bushes, Luna said matter-of-factly. She looked really embarrassed. I didn't tell you because I wanted to figure out what she was doing first. I stared at my daughter, this fierce little alpha who was so much like her mother and so completely her own person. I should have been angry that she had kept a secret from me. Instead, I felt a strange pride welling up in my chest. You are very brave, I signed. And very smart. But you should have told me. You would have yelled at her, Luna pointed out, her logic infuriatingly sound. She was just trying to be nice. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I was losing control of this situation. Valerie was infiltrating my life through my children, and I couldn't even be angry about it because she had done it with picture books. Mama needs to think, I signed. Can you keep this between us for now? Your sisters don't need to know yet. Luna nodded solemnly. I won't tell them. But Mama, I think you should talk to her. For real. Without yelling or writing mean things on your board. I stared at my daughter, this 5-year-old who had somehow become wiser than I was. Maybe you're right, I signed, the admission tasting like ash in my mouth. And for the first time in 5 years, I let myself think the thought I had been too afraid to acknowledge. Maybe I still loved her. Maybe I had never stopped. 3 days later, I walked to the Sea Breeze Inn. It was a run-down building at the edge of town, the paint peeling and the sign flickering in the coastal wind. I had passed it 100 times, never giving it a second thought. Now I stood outside its door, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I had told Mrs. Higgins to watch the children. I had told myself I was only coming here to tell Valerie to leave town, to make it clear that her presence was destroying the peace I had built. But as I climbed the creaky stairs to the second floor, I knew that was a lie. I knocked on the door of room 207. It opened to reveal a startled Valerie, her gray eyes going wide with shock. She was wearing a simple gray sweater and worn jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked nothing like the powerful CEO who had once commanded boardrooms and bowed to no one. "Elena," she breathed. "Is something wrong?" "Are the children?" "They're fine," I signed quickly. "Can I come in?" Valerie practically lunged out of the way, her gestures clumsy with nervousness. "Of course." "Yes. Come in." "I'm sorry about the mess. I didn't expect visitors." The room was small and cramped, the single window looking out onto a brick wall. There was a rumpled bed, a nightstand, a small desk piled with notebooks. On the wall above the desk, I noticed something that made my breath catch. Pictures. Dozens of them. Photos of the children, printed from online articles about the Silent Haven's success. Photos of Luna at the school's spring festival. Photos of Iris and Hazel at the bakery's grand reopening. Photos she had taken from a distance, the subjects unaware they were being observed. I turned to face her, my hands moving in rapid, furious signs. "You've been stalking my children." "No." Valerie held up her hands defensively. "I mean, I've been watching, but not like, I wasn't trying to." She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. "I needed to know they were okay. I needed to see them. I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't have. But I couldn't help myself." I stared at her, my anger warring with a tangled knot of other emotions I didn't want to name. "You left a box of books on our porch." Valerie's face flushed. "They were for the girls. I saw the book fair at the elementary school, and I noticed they had checked out a lot of ocean books. I thought they might like to have some of their own." "Why?" "Because they're my daughters, Elena." Her voice cracked on the word. "I know I have no right to call them that. I know I forfeited any right to them when I threw you out. But they're still my children. My flesh and blood. Every night I dream about what they must be like, what Luna's favorite color is, what Iris and Hazel laugh at, whether they have your talent for baking or my stubbornness. I didn't sign anything. I couldn't." The emotions were too tangled, too overwhelming. Valerie sank onto the edge of the bed, her head dropping into her hands. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm not trying to take them away. I need to be near them. Even if I can never touch them. Even if they never know who I am." I sat down on the rickety chair at the desk, my legs suddenly unable to support me. I reached for my whiteboard, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. "I wanted to tell you to leave town. But I can't. Because Luna asked me about you. She wants to meet you." Valerie's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Luna? The alpha twin?" "Yes. She found out about you. She asked me why you weren't in our lives." I told her the truth. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you made a terrible mistake. I told her you were sorry. I told her you loved her, even if you didn't know how to show it." Valerie broke down completely then. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. But I didn't leave either. "You can meet them," I signed. "But only if you agree to my terms." Valerie looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Anything. I'll agree to anything." 1. The meeting will be at my house. With me present. Always. Of course. 2. You will not sugarcoat the truth. If they ask why you weren't there, you will be honest. I promise. 3. If any of them want you to leave, you will leave. No arguments. No pushing. Okay. 4. This isn't for you. It's for them. They deserve to know where they come from. But if you hurt them, if you hurt any of them, I will destroy you. Valerie met my eyes, her gaze steady despite the tears still streaming down her face. "I know you will. And I wouldn't blame you." I stared at her for a long moment, searching for any hint of deception. I found none. "Saturday," I signed. 3 p.m. "Don't be late." And I walked out of the room, leaving her sitting on the edge of that sagging bed, clutching the hope I had given her like a lifeline. Saturday arrived with a storm. Dark clouds rolled in from the sea, bringing wind and rain that lashed against the windows of my clifftop house. The children were bouncing with nervous energy, having spent the entire morning asking questions I couldn't answer. "Is she coming yet?" Iris demanded for the 5th time. "Not yet," Luna signed back, rolling her eyes. "She's not coming until 3. It's only 2. Maybe she'll bring presents," Hazel suggested hopefully. "Mama always brings presents when she visits people." "She's not visiting," Luna said sharply. "She's meeting us." "Is there a difference?" Iris asked. Luna opened her mouth to reply, then closed it again, apparently unsure. I watched them from the kitchen doorway, my heart so full it ached. These 3 beautiful, chaotic, wonderful children had been my entire world for 5 years. They had given me purpose when I had none. They had loved me when I felt unlovable. And now I was about to share them with the woman who had broken my heart. The doorbell rang at exactly 3 p.m. I opened the door to find Valerie standing on the doorstep, soaking wet from the rain, clutching a large shopping bag in one hand. She was wearing what I assumed was her nicest outfit, a simple but well-tailored jacket over a cream sweater, but the rain had reduced it to a sodden mess. "I'm sorry," she said, her teeth chattering slightly. "I didn't think the rain would be this bad. I can wait outside until I dry off." "Don't be ridiculous," I signed, grabbing her arm and pulling her into the foyer. I handed her a towel and gestured toward the bathroom. "Dry off. I'll introduce you when you're presentable." She nodded, clutching the towel like a lifeline. "The bag, it's for the girls. I know they don't need anything, but I wanted to, I took the bag from her, my hand brushing against hers. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through my entire body. "Just dry off." She disappeared into the bathroom, and I turned to find all 3 of my children standing at the end of the hallway, staring at me with wide eyes. "Is she here?" Hazel whispered. "Yes, but she's very wet. She needs a moment." "I like her already," Iris announced. "She's silly." I almost laughed. Almost. When Valerie emerged from the bathroom, her hair was still damp, but she looked more composed. I led her into the living room, where the children had arranged themselves on the sofa in order of age, Luna on one end, Hazel in the middle, Iris on the other. Valerie stopped in the doorway, her eyes roving over the 3 small faces. I saw the tears welling up in her eyes, the way she blinked rapidly to hold them back. "These are my daughters," I signed, my movements slow and deliberate so she could understand. "Luna, Iris, Hazel. Girls, this is..." I stopped, suddenly unsure what to call her. "Valerie? Your other mother? The woman who hurt me?" "My name is Valerie," she said, her voice rough with emotion. I'm your..." She looked at me, a question in her eyes. I nodded slowly. "I'm your mother." Luna stood up, her little body radiating authority. "Our mama told us about you. She said you made a mistake. A really big mistake." Valerie's face crumpled, but she held herself together. "She's right. I did. The biggest mistake of my life." "Do you still love her?" Luna asked, and the question hung in the air like a bomb. Valerie looked at me, her gray eyes burning with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Yes," she said, her voice unwavering. "I never stopped loving her. Not for a single day." "I think you should sit down," Iris said, patting the cushion beside her. "You look like you're going to cry." Valerie laughed, a wet, broken sound, and sank onto the sofa between the twins. Luna remained standing, studying her with those sharp gray eyes. "Do you love us?" she asked. Valerie's composure shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded frantically. "Yes, more than anything. More than you could possibly understand." "Then why did you make our mama sad?" Hazel asked, her small voice trembling. I was blind, Valerie said, her voice breaking. I was stupid and arrogant, and I believed lies because they were easier to believe than the truth. I didn't know about you. If I had known, I would have. She stopped, unable to continue. Would have what? Luna pressed. Valerie looked at me again, and I saw everything in her eyes. Regret. Love. Desperation. 1,000 unspoken promises. I would have come for you, she whispered. I would have torn the world apart to find you. The silence stretched between us, heavy with all the years that had been lost. And then, without warning, Hazel and Iris launched themselves at Valerie, throwing their small arms around her neck. Valerie froze for a second, and then she wrapped her arms around them, holding them like they were the most precious things in the universe. I watched my daughters embrace the woman who had destroyed our family, and something inside me cracked open. Luna walked over to me, her small hand slipping into mine. She really does love us, Mama. I can smell it. I looked down at my fierce little Alpha, this child who had been forced to grow up too fast, who had protected her sisters and her mother with a ferocity beyond her years. Do you want to give her a chance? I signed. Luna considered this for a long moment. Then she walked over to the sofa and sat down on Valerie's other side. I'm not going to forgive you yet, she announced. But I'll let you stay. For now. Valerie laughed through her tears, pulling Luna into the group hug. And I stood in the doorway, watching the four of them, and realized that the wall around my heart wasn't as strong as I thought. For months later, the winter had thawed into a gentle spring. Valerie was still living at the Seabreeze Inn, but she had moved from the cramped room to a small cottage on the edge of town. She had found a job as a bookkeeper at the local library, a job that was a far cry from running a billion-dollar empire, but one that she seemed to genuinely enjoy. She saw the children twice a week. Sometimes at my house, sometimes at the park, sometimes at the bakery where they would help her shape dough into ridiculous shapes that never rose properly. The children adored her. Even Luna, who had been the most guarded, had started to warm up. And I was confused, because I still loved her. That much was undeniable. But I also still resented her. I couldn't forget the years of loneliness. I couldn't forget the sight of her standing there while Celeste poured poison into her ear. I couldn't forget the feeling of walking out into that freezing rain, pregnant and alone, with nowhere to go. Every time I looked at Valerie, I remembered both the woman who had shattered me and the woman who had given me 3 beautiful children. It was impossible to reconcile the two. She's not going to give up, Mrs. Higgins told me one afternoon as we were closing the bakery. That woman is in love with you. Anyone with eyes can see it. I rolled my eyes, signing back. She's in love with the idea of me. The perfect memory. That's not the same. Oh, honey. Mrs. Higgins shook her head with a sad smile. You're the smartest woman I know, but you can be so stupid sometimes. I glared at her, but she just patted my cheek and left me alone with my thoughts. That night, I found myself walking to Valerie's cottage. The rain had started again, soft and gentle, the kind of rain that felt more like a blessing than a burden. I stood outside her door for a long time, trying to gather the courage to knock. I didn't want to love her again. I had spent 5 years learning to live without her, learning to be strong and independent and whole. Letting her back in felt like admitting that those 5 years had been a waste. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way she looked at our daughters. The way she held them like they were made of glass. The way she never pushed, never demanded, always waited for permission. She had changed. That much was obvious. But was the change real? Or was it just another performance? I knocked. Valerie opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise. Elena? Is everything okay? Are the children? Everything is fine, I signed quickly. I just wanted to talk. She stepped aside, and I walked into her small cottage. It was clean and cozy, filled with the books she had started collecting, children's books, mostly, saved for the days when the girls visited. I sat down on her worn sofa, and she sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I know I have no right to ask," she said slowly, "but I love you, Elena. I've never stopped loving you. And I know I destroyed your trust. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But I'm asking anyway." I pulled out my whiteboard, my hands shaking. "What if I can't forgive you?" Valerie's face crumpled, but she didn't look away. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life earning your trust anyway. Even if you never forgive me, I'll be here. I'll be the best mother I can be to our children. I'll be the best person I can be. And I'll wait." She reached across the space between us, her hand hovering over mine, not quite touching. "I'll wait forever if I have to." I stared at her hand, so close to mine. I remembered the way it had felt to hold it in the darkness of our bedroom. I remembered the way it had felt to be pushed away. And I remembered the way it had felt to stand in that hotel hallway and see her on her knees, begging for a chance. I made a decision. I reached out and took her hand. Valerie gasped, her eyes going wide. "Elena? What?" "I'm not ready. I signed with my free hand. Not for everything. But I'm not going to push you away either." Valerie's face lit up with a tentative, fragile hope. "What does that mean?" "It means you can stay. It means we can try. Slowly. Carefully. And if you hurt me again—" "I won't," she interrupted fiercely. "I swear on my life. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right." I squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back. For the first time in 5 years, I felt something that might have been hope. 1 year later, the spring had come again, and with it, a small ceremony on the cliffs overlooking the sea. It wasn't a wedding, not officially. Neither of us was ready for that. But it was a promise. A public declaration that we were in this together, no matter what. The children stood at the front of the small gathering, dressed in matching white dresses. Luna held a ring box, her expression solemn. Iris and Hazel clutched handfuls of wildflowers they had picked themselves. Mrs. Higgins officiated, her voice warm and full of tears. "We are gathered here today to witness the renewal of a bond," she said, "a bond that was broken by pride and lies, but that has been rebuilt through patience and love." I stood facing Valerie, my hands trembling in hers. She looked beautiful in a simple cream suit, her gray eyes shining with tears. "Elena," Mrs. Higgins continued, "do you promise to love this woman, to honor her, to keep her in your heart through all the seasons of your life?" I couldn't speak, but I nodded and I signed the words with my hands. "I do." Valerie's tears spilled over. "I promise too," she whispered. "I promise to be the partner you deserve. I promise to trust you, to believe in you, to never let anything come between us again." We slipped rings onto each other's fingers, simple silver bands that glinted in the afternoon sun. Luna stepped forward, her small face serious. "Do you promise to never make our mama sad again?" Valerie knelt down to her level, meeting her eyes with absolute sincerity. "I promise, Luna. I'll spend every day making her happy." Luna considered this for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I guess you can stay." The gathered crowd laughed, and Valerie pulled Luna into a hug. Iris and Hazel threw their wildflowers into the air, and the petals rained down on all of us like confetti. I stood there, surrounded by my family, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt whole. 2 years later, the bakery was thriving, the children were growing up fast, and Valerie had officially become co-owner of the Silent Haven. She had given up any pretense of returning to the corporate world, and instead had thrown herself into learning the art of baking with a determination that made me laugh. She was terrible at it. Her pastries were always lopsided, her frosting always too thin, but she didn't care. "I like it," she told me one night as we sat on the back porch of our house, watching the sunset. "It's honest. You can't fake a good croissant. You can't buy your way to perfect bread." I leaned against her shoulder, signing with my free hand. I don't think you'll ever be a master baker. I know, she said, laughing. That's why I'm leaving it to the expert. She kissed the top of my head, and I let myself sink into the warmth of her. It wasn't perfect. We still fought sometimes. I still had nightmares about the night she threw me out. She still had moments of guilt so overwhelming she would apologize for things she didn't even do. But we were learning. We were healing. And for the first time in my life, I believed that happy endings might be real. In the end, love wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending it never happened. It was about choosing someone anyway, choosing them despite the pain, despite the fear, despite every reason to walk away. Valerie had broken me, but she had also helped me rebuild myself into someone stronger. And I had done the same for her. We had built a new world together, not by erasing the past, but by building something better on top of it. Our daughters grew up knowing their mother's story, the good parts and the bad. They learned that love was complicated, that people made terrible mistakes, and that redemption was possible. But they also learned something else. They learned that a family wasn't defined by blood or fate or the circumstances of their birth. A family was defined by choice. And we had chosen each other. Every single day. 8 years after that stormy night in Silver Peak City, I stood on the same cliffs where Valerie had once begged me for a second chance. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Behind me, I could hear the sound of my daughters laughing, Luna arguing with Iris about something ridiculous, Hazel trying to mediate. Valerie came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist and resting her chin on my shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts," she murmured. I turned in her arms, my hands moving in familiar signs. I was thinking about the night I left, about how much has changed. Valerie's arms tightened around me. I still dream about it sometimes. The look on your face when I threw those papers at you. I touched her cheek, drawing her gaze to mine. We were different people then. We were, she agreed. We've grown. We've healed. She stopped, unable to continue. I kissed her softly. I love you, I signed against her lips. I love our family. And I'm glad we found our way back to each other. Valerie pulled me into a proper kiss, her lips warm and familiar against mine. I love you too, she whispered. More than I ever thought I could love anyone. Behind us, the twins started arguing about who got the last piece of cake, and Luna's authoritative voice cut through the chaos with a harshly whispered, "Will you two shut up? They're having a moment." Valerie and I pulled apart, laughing. "Children," Valerie called out, her voice full of affectionate exasperation. "There's more cake in the kitchen." The twins immediately stopped fighting and sprinted toward the house, Luna following at a more dignified pace. I looked at Valerie, my wife, my partner, my best friend. "Thank you," I signed, "for not giving up on me." Valerie took my hand, raising it to her lips and kissing my knuckles. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." We stood there on the cliffs, watching the sun sink beneath the waves, our hands intertwined. The past was behind us. The future was ahead. And in between, there was only love. Extra story. The first time Valerie's rut hit after they had reconciled, Elena woke to the unmistakable scent of cedarwood and winter frost, but twisted into something sharp, almost desperate. The clock on the nightstand read 3:47 a.m. Beside her, Valerie was trembling violently, her body curled into a tight ball, her breathing ragged and shallow. Even in the darkness, Elena could see the sheen of sweat on her forehead, the way her fingers dug into the mattress like she was trying to anchor herself to something solid. Elena reached out, her hand hovering over Valerie's shoulder. She didn't touch, not yet. She had read about alpha ruts, had heard the stories from other omegas, but she had never witnessed one firsthand. In their 3 years of marriage before everything fell apart, Valerie had always managed her cycles with suppressants, never allowing herself to be vulnerable in front of anyone. But things were different now. Valerie had stopped taking the suppressants months ago, claiming they made her feel numb, disconnected from her instincts. Elena hadn't pressed the issue. Now she understood why. Valerie let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that was equal parts pain and desperation. Her gray eyes snapped open, unfocused, wild. When they landed on Elena, something in them shifted. The wildness didn't disappear, but it became targeted. Focused. Elena, Valerie choked out, her voice raw and cracked. You need to leave. Now. Elena's heart clenched. She signed frantically, her hands moving in the darkness. I'm not leaving you. You don't understand. Valerie's hands flew up, pushing against the air as if trying to physically force Elena away. I can't. I don't trust myself right now. My control is gone. If I hurt you, you won't hurt me. You don't know that. Valerie's voice broke. I've never been like this around anyone. I've always managed it alone. But now, with you here, your scent is everywhere and I can't. She broke off, a shudder racking her entire body. The scent of cedarwood intensified, flooding the room with an almost suffocating warmth. Elena felt something stir in her own chest, an answering pull, deep and primal. Her omega instincts, usually so carefully controlled, were waking up. I trust you, Elena signed, her hands steady despite the tremor building in her core. I've never stopped trusting you. Valerie stared at her, something broken and beautiful in her gray eyes. I don't deserve that trust. But I'm giving it to you anyway, Elena signed. Now stop pushing me away and let me help you. She reached out again, this time not hesitating. Her fingers brushed against Valerie's cheek, and the alpha gasped as if she'd been electrocuted. The scent of cedarwood shifted, still desperate, but now laced with something else. Relief. Need. Elena, please, Valerie whispered, her voice barely audible. I need you to touch me. I need to feel you. Just please. Elena didn't need to be asked twice. She pulled Valerie into her arms, wrapping herself around the larger woman's trembling frame. Valerie buried her face in the curve of Elena's neck, inhaling deeply, her whole body shuddering with the contact. You smell like home, Valerie breathed against her skin. Like safety. Like everything I thought I'd lost forever. Elena held her tighter, her hands running soothing patterns down Valerie's back. She could feel the heat radiating off her alpha, the way her muscles were wound tight with tension. Slowly, methodically, she began to relax against Elena's touch, the violent trembling easing into something gentler. Stay, Valerie murmured, her voice already slurring with exhaustion. Please don't leave. Elena pressed a kiss to the top of her head, signing against her skin. I'm not going anywhere. The next morning, Valerie woke with a start, her eyes flying open in panic. The first thing she registered was the warmth pressed against her chest, Elena's body, curled trustingly against her own. The second thing she registered was the smell. Her own scent had calmed overnight, returning to its usual notes of cedar and frost. But now it was layered with something else, Elena's scent, vanilla and rain, intertwined so thoroughly with her own that she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Oh God, Valerie whispered, pulling back slightly to look at Elena's sleeping face. Elena, wake up. Elena stirred, blinking sleepily. When she saw the panic on Valerie's face, she sat up immediately. What's wrong? Are you still? No, I mean, yes, but that's not. Valerie ran a hand through her tangled hair, her face flushed. Elena, I think we bonded. Last night. In my rut. I didn't mean to, I wasn't trying to. Elena's hands stilled over her chest, her heart suddenly pounding. She could feel it now, a subtle shift in her instincts, a new awareness of Valerie that hadn't been there before. It was like a thread connecting them, thin but unbreakable, humming with quiet warmth. I know, she signed slowly. I feel it too. Shit. Valerie dropped her head into her hands. I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. I should have. Stop apologizing. Elena reached out and gently pulled Valerie's hands away from her face. I wanted this. I chose to stay. But I didn't give you a choice. You gave me every choice. You tried to send me away. I refused to go. Elena's gaze was steady, unwavering. I'm not your victim, Valerie. I'm your partner. And partners help each other through things like this. Valerie stared at her, her gray eyes swimming with tears. I don't deserve you. Elena leaned forward, pressing her forehead against Valerie's. Maybe not. But you have me anyway. 3 months later, it was Elena's heat that came knocking. She had been managing her cycles with suppressants for years, partly out of necessity, partly out of fear. The last time she had experienced a full heat cycle was before she'd left Valerie, and the memory was a tangled mess of longing and heartbreak. This time, there was no heartbreak. Only Valerie, hovering anxiously in the doorway of their bedroom, her alpha instincts on high alert. Elena, are you sure you want me here? Valerie asked, her voice strained. I can call Mrs. Higgins to watch the girls. I can sleep in the guest room. Elena grabbed her hand and pulled her into the room, slamming the door behind them. I need you here, she signed, her movements urgent, almost frantic. Please, Valerie. I can't do this alone. The scent of vanilla and rain had intensified into something thick and almost intoxicating. Valerie's pupils dilated, her breathing quickening as her alpha instincts roared to life. I'm here, Valerie promised, pulling Elena into her arms. I'm not going anywhere. Elena pressed her face against Valerie's neck, inhaling the comforting scent of cedarwood and winter frost. Her body was racked with waves of heat and need, every nerve ending screaming for contact, for comfort, for her alpha. Just breathe, Valerie murmured, her hands moving in soothing circles on Elena's back. I've got you. Elena's heat was intense, more intense than she remembered. But it was also different. Softer. Because Valerie was there. Valerie held her through every wave, whispered reassurances against her skin, never once pulling away. Near the end of the third day, when Elena was finally lucid enough to form coherent thoughts, she looked up at Valerie with tears in her eyes. You held me, she signed weakly. Even when I was. Of course I did. Valerie pressed a kiss to her forehead. You're my mate. My omega. The mother of my children. I would never abandon you to this. Elena's breath hitched. Your omega. Valerie froze, her face flushing. I didn't mean to, I know we haven't officially. Yes. Elena's hands moved with sudden, fierce certainty. I am your omega. And you are my alpha. That's been true since the first time we met. It just took us a while to remember. Valerie's tears spilled over, hot against Elena's skin. I love you, she whispered. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that. 1 year later, on the anniversary of their commitment ceremony, Valerie brought Elena to the cliffs overlooking the sea. I never gave you a proper bond, Valerie said, her voice uncharacteristically nervous. I mean, we're bonded in every way that matters, but I never did it the traditional way. I never asked for your permission. Not really. Elena tilted her head, curious. What are you saying? Valerie dropped to one knee, not with a ring this time, but with something else. A small velvet pouch. Elena Nightingale Ravenwood, Valerie said, her voice thick with emotion. Will you let me complete the bond? Will you let me mark you, the way alphas have marked their omegas for centuries? Will you truly be mine in every way? Elena's hands were trembling as she signed. You're asking permission? After everything we've already been through? I'm asking because you deserve to choose, Valerie said. You've always deserved the choice. And I want you to know this is your decision. It's always been your decision. Elena pulled her up, pressing her lips to Valerie's in a kiss that said everything words couldn't. Yes, she signed against Valerie's mouth. Yes, yes, yes. Valerie laughed through her tears, her hands cupping Elena's face like she was something precious. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for trusting me. She leaned in, her lips brushing against the spot where Elena's neck met her shoulder, the place where the bond would be made permanent. Is this okay? Valerie asked, her breath warm against Elena's skin. Elena nodded, her hands gripping Valerie's shoulders. Valerie bit down, gentle but firm, and Elena felt the bond click into place, a warmth that spread through her entire body, settling deep in her chest. It was like coming home. Like the final piece of a puzzle she hadn't known was missing. She pulled back, her eyes meeting Valerie's. The bond hummed between them, a constant, quiet reminder of what they had built together. I love you, Valerie said, her voice breaking with the weight of the words. I'm going to love you every single day for the rest of my life. Elena smiled, the first true, unguarded smile she had given Valerie in years. I love you too, she signed. I never stopped. I just had to learn how to trust again. Valerie pulled her into another kiss, and the bond sang between them, a harmony of cedar and vanilla, frost and rain, two souls finally complete. From that night on, the bond was unbreakable. Valerie's ruts were no longer periods of isolation and pain. They were times of connection, of vulnerability, of Elena holding her through the worst of it. Elena's heats were no longer lonely battles. They were celebrations of love, of trust, of the life they had built together. Their scents changed too, still distinct, but now always intertwined, a constant reminder to the world and to themselves that they belonged to each other. The children grew up in a house filled with the scent of love. Luna inherited her mother's protective instincts, but she also inherited Elena's quiet strength. Iris and Hazel learned to read scents as easily as they read books, using their omega intuition to navigate the world. And every night, when the house was quiet and the children were asleep, Valerie and Elena would lie together in their bed, their bond humming contentedly between them. You smell like home, Valerie would whisper, burying her face in Elena's neck. Elena would sign against her skin, her fingers tracing the outline of the bond mark. So do you. And that was enough.